Transmission begins.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
This is the Josh Tolley Show on the GCN Radio Network.
8 days from now, one of the best conferences that you can attend is taking place, and the live in-person tickets are absolutely sold out. However, you can still live stream it. You can go to hearthewatchman.com, click on the live stream link, purchase the live stream, and the great thing about it is you get to then watch it over the next 30 days. It can just be rewatched, or you can watch part at a time, come back for the other parts. And I'm telling you, you will not regret it if you do, because one of the speakers who joins us now is going to be there as well. His name is Marzulli, and he's been on this show a number of times, and every time he is on this show, man, I'm telling you, he just scares the bejeebies out of me. Welcome to the show, sir. How you doing?
I'm good, Josh. Thanks for having me on, and congratulations on your marriage. Very cool.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Sure.
So there are a few things I want to cover with you today, and I'm glad we have the time to do it. The first thing is something that I recently heard you talking about on another show, and it's something that I've never even heard of before, with the slight reference to a shapeshifter in a Val Kilmer movie once. What is a shapeshifter or skinwalker for people who've never heard of this?
First of all, I don't want to use that term. I've been told by Chief Joseph, well, only because I've been told by Chief Joseph Riverwind, don't even mention it. I remember the first time I mentioned that phrase, SW, to Chief Joseph. He told me that if I had been sitting in let's say a council of First Nation people, most of them would have gotten up and left the room.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's really intense stuff. I have spoken to, in fact, this is all written down in the Nephilim Hybrids book, which you can, shameless plug. If you want to hear the whole story in detail, you can, pick up a copy of the book on my website, lamarzulli.net. Shameless plug. But the bottom line is, I spent time on a Navajo reservation and spoke to several people there. One of which remains. Most of these people will not come on the record. But this one particular man is a pastor, and his father was a pastor. And he told me, actually took me to the spot where he showed me where the encounter happened. When he was about 15, 16 years old, he and like three other boys were walking on the reservation in this one particular area. And this area is sort of like, it's got mounds all over it. They're not burial mounds. It's just a feature of nature. But the hills kind of roll, and there's different sized mounds. And as they were walking, they heard this howling noise, this piercing howl. And they ran up to the top of this one mound, and coming towards them was what can only be described as a wolf man. It had the head of a wolf, the arms of a man, the legs of a wolf, but the body of a man. And they knew what it was, because growing up on the reservation, you hear about all this. And they ran for their lives, and this thing followed them and chased them down. Another time, this man was part of the tribe, and this guy's father was a pastor. And the phone rang, and this family was being terrorized by an SW. And the pastor, without hesitation, grabbed his Bible and said, "Let's go, son." Took his son, which was at this time 21 years old, hopped in the truck, and they went to the house. And the pastor, without any hesitation, jumped out of the car and chased this thing down in the name of Jesus. So
did he catch it?
Well, the thing left. I mean, the thing ran away. And the thing is, we have, as the believers, we have authority when we use that authority in the name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I mean, that's we put on the armor of God, the helmet of salvation, the breastplate of righteousness, the belt of truth, the shoes of peace, the shield of faith, the sword of the Spirit. What we're doing is we're putting on Yeshua, we're putting on Jesus. We're making a conscious mental effort to put him on. and we walk around in his authority, not our own. And that's he knew his authority. Now, I've also interviewed a man who is a Navajo elder who became a pastor by the name of Jimmy Etsity. And this man was actually studying to be a shaman. And one of the things you have to do in order to become an SW is you have to kill a family member.
Oh, jeez.
Oh yeah, this is all very, very real. It just went underground when the white man showed up. It's been there for thousands and thousands of years, and this is it's just ongoing, and it's real. I mean, these entities or these human beings take on a totem. Some will put on the skins of wolves and shape-shift and become that. That's a Wolfman deal. That's why it's called skin W's. And I don't mean to be deliberately cryptic here, but I just don't like using the term, especially after Chief Joseph lectured me on it, and I honor Chief Joseph, and I just think it's smart not to utter it. So these things are there. The shamans that are in these places have been practicing this literally for thousands and thousands of years, literally. And there's power there. And, of course, the power comes from the dark side. It's utterly Luciferic, utterly satanic. And it's a reality. I mean, they all know it. I mean, they don't – you talk to any Navajo on the reservation, they know exactly what you're talking about. No one's going to go, oh, well, we don't believe in that. They know exactly what you're talking about.
So do these SWs, can they return to their human shape through a reversal?
Yeah, they do. They go back and forth. Interestingly enough, you remember Kojak the Night Stalker?
That's a little bit before me, but
yeah, that's probably before your time. There was a TV show in, I guess the 70s. It was called Kolchak the Night Stalker. And, I mean, it was one of my favorite TV shows because I've always been interested in the paranormal and the supernatural and the biblical prophetic narrative and how all this plays out. I wasn't a Christian at the time, but I was drawn to it. But one of the episodes was exactly this. They had an SW that was on the show. And they had researched it, fairly well. And it was pretty much on point as I remember it. But, yeah, I mean, these human beings have the ability to shapeshift. They move in and out. And this is what... See, this is the problem with all this, Josh, is the church never gets into this stuff.
Right.
And most pastors would have no idea what to do with something. They'd run. They'd flee. And rightfully so. They're not taught this stuff in seminary. I remember talking to a pastor that spent a number of years in Indonesia. And this is going back 40 years when he was stationed over there. And, I mean, that's what they dealt with. They dealt with all sorts of crazy, crazy things that over here we would just be aghast at what and it was just normal.
Well, L.A., hold on one second. We're up against a break, but that actually kind of brings up a question about something else that we have had reports of seeing and we can never find, and I want to see if there's a connection there. Stay where you're at, folks. We'll be back right after this. All right, we are talking to L.A. Marzulli, lamarzulli.net. Definitely get his books, get his DVDs, share them with other people, and enjoy this conversation. But, folks, this conversation is not going to be long enough. This is why you have to get the live stream of the Hear the Watchman conference, March 31st through April 2nd, hearthewatchman.com. Get the live stream, have friends come over, just make sure the lights are on, because it... especially when LA talks about some of the stuff he talks about. So LA, I mean, obviously, and I don't even think I'm going to have to tell you what I'm specifically what I'm thinking, but I'm hearing you say this and saying that these SWs can then go back into human form. Right. And I'm thinking of another creature that we seem to see, but we can never get a physical specimen of. Do you know what I'm referring to?
Bigfoot.
Yes. Yes. Is there a connection here?
No, these are two totally different entities. It's interesting that out once again. Look, I haven't spent a lot of time on the reservation.
Sure,
but I've spent enough time and talked to people to know that this whole area is like a gateway. I mean, it really is, because remember that the land has been defiled, and I say that with all due respect to First Nation people, but the land was defiled through shamanism, and that, for the most part, it's never really been renounced. Therefore, the people that are living there are subject to all sorts of nonsense. And I mean, I remember the first time I was there, and I was presenting my material at a conference there, and it was a really small church. I mean, they had maybe 50 people, and I'm being generous. So it was like, and we realized that a lot of the people didn't have money, to buy any of our products and stuff, and so we just started giving stuff away for free, because you realize that sometimes it's not about, us selling books or making a profit. It's about arming people with information that they need, and you just do it gratis, knowing that the Lord, Father God will make up for it in another way, which of course He always does. So,
yeah,
we did what we had to do. But I remember a woman coming up to me and just telling me, "Oh yeah, we've got Sasquatch down by the river. We have sightings there all the time. We have a UFO behind, I forget what she called it, I think it was like Hogs Mountain or something like that, where this woman lived, and, she's seen UFOs, that they've got Sasquatch, Bigfoot reportings, they've got SWs running around. I mean, in the same area, we've had reports of, believe it or not, centaurs.
What?
How do you vet that? And it came through a person who works, as a paramedic. And this person called me and said, "Look, you're not going to believe this, but I'm in an ambulance with a husband and wife, and the woman is having like a heart attack or there's something wrong, and she's like, we're taking her to the hospital, and the husband's in the ambulance with her, and I'm there tending to her, and we're driving because it's a way out in the reservation, and we've got a bit of a drive to get to the hospital." And out of the blue, without any prompting at all, the man, the husband, strikes up a conversation with the paramedic and asks him, "Have you ever heard of half horse, half man?" And the paramedic goes, "What are you talking about?" And he tells the paramedic a story that his wife returns home, and there were 3 of these things in the backyard, which we know as centaurs. The body of a horse, and from let's say the waist up, the body of a man. And there were 3 of them. It was like a family. And the younger one was near the clothesline, and they were talking, apparently. And when they saw them pull up in the truck, they looked at them and galloped away. Now that's crazy. I mean, that is, you listen to that and you go, that's one of the craziest things I've ever heard. I mean, what do you do with something like that? And that's down in the Four Corners, right near an Apache reservation. And you remember, none of this, the land has been defiled. And again, what I mean by that is that the land, because of shamanism, because of all the stuff that it entails, that nothing has changed there in like thousands of years. Who knows what's going on? And nothing would surprise me at this point. I mean, nothing.
Well, would you think the closer we get to the end or whatever's next, the more weird sort of supernatural anomalies we're going to be hearing about?
Well, look, we know from the biblical prophetic narrative that Satan comes with all signs and lying wonders. And that's a verse that many pastors never, ever want to talk about. Oh, it's too dark. We don't want to frighten our parishioners. So, yeah, that's right. Don't frighten your parishioners. Keep them ignorant of what's really going on and what's happening. So when things really go south, they'll be completely clueless. That's really great. That's a great way to arm your people. Look, we have to teach people the entire counsel of the biblical prophetic narrative, everything that is there, the good and the bad. And we're told Satan comes with all signs and lying wonders. What about that don't we understand? I mean, I can't say it any plainer than that. We are entering a time. I had a conversation with Gary Stearman, if I can interrupt myself here. I had a conversation with Gary Stearman. I said, Gary, if you and I could go back in time 40 years, right, and I were to tell you, and someone came up to us 40 years ago and said, hey, guess what, guys? Gay marriage will be the law of the land in 2015. We look at each other and go, impossible. It'll never happen. It'll never happen. Here we are in 2017, gay marriage, the law of the land. I mean, this is how far down the rabbit hole we are. And now, again, 40 years ago, if you had said, yeah, there'll be this thing called jihad and Islamic terror, and these people will just do random acts of violence all over Europe, and Europe will be under siege. In fact, on 2016, on New Year's Eve, they'll have 100,000 military men and women on the streets of Paris to protect them. That's called a police state, and that's reality. If we had said a statement like that, you'd go, well, that's never going to happen. The people of France would never allow that, L.A. Here we are. This is how far down the rabbit hole we are, and it ain't going away. And then you start, and this is what I wrote the book, Days of Chaos, which, I don't blame you folks for not reading it. So remain in the dark. Don't buy the book. Stay ignorant. I mean, I've done my part as a watchman, so I have no apologies to anybody. But Days of Chaos is a whole chapter on Fukushima, and that thing came out before the 5-year report that said that the fuel rods at Fukushima have melted through the containment shell, and no one knows where they are. And now we get reports that the Pacific is contaminated, that there's no fish anywhere. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And so we are in the days of chaos. We are in the midst of a cosmic regime change, which is what I discussed last year at Hear the Watchman. This year will be a completely different subject. It'll be on the whole burgeoning UFO phenomenon, which is what the new film that I just created is about, The Watchmen Chronicles. It's a brand new series. The first installment is, in their own words, UFOs are real. And people from all walks of life come on the record. They're all Christians, born-again, spiritual Christian people, but they've had encounters before they came of the Lord and after they came of the Lord. And in some of the cases, it's very, very intense stuff, especially Al Matthews' testimony of what happened and how his experiences eventually led him to Jesus. I mean, it was just, I wouldn't wish this on anybody. But the film, in fact, I'll be on Coast to Coast next week, and Lisa Lyon, the producer, we were chatting it up last night. She was going, what's the film about? And I said, well, we've got a deathbed confession from Colonel Hill, who was 90 years old, telling us that Roswell was real. We've got pilots who saw UFOs come into their commercial jetliner at speeds of excess of 30,000 miles an hour. We've got people who have been abducted, had missing time. Their entire car was taken off the road and beamed up into a ship, and on it goes.
Wow.
It's
all right, LA, hold on 1 second. We're up against a break. We'll take the break, come back right after this. Don't go anywhere, folks. I'm telling you, you're going to be upset when this interview ends, so go to lamarzulli.net, grab his materials there. Also sign up for the Hear the Watchman live stream, hearthewatchman.com. L.A. Marzulli, it's interesting. We had a listener during the break say, Josh, L.A.'s right. The Bible reminds us that Moshe, or Moses, was trained in all of the arts of the Egyptians. That would include magic, spellcasting, possibly even astral projections. We Christians need to be prepared for this. And what you're telling me reminds me of something that where I'm from in Wisconsin is actually kind of common folklore. There is a beast there called the Bray Road Beast. And this is something that highway workers have run into. It's always around Indian mounds and in, sacred sort of areas. This stuff is the stuff of legend, but it seems to be coming back with a vengeance.
Well, it's never gone away. It just went underground. I mean, it's always been here. I mean, I remember seeing as a child, there were movies that I could not watch, and I didn't understand why I was so troubled by them, why they bothered me. People would go, well, you're just a snowflake, you're just too sensitive. No, I think even then, because at 5 years old, I was grabbing a Bible and yelling, "What is the truth? What is the truth?" And I have relatives who told me that, and they laugh hysterically because here's this 5-year-old kid making a makeshift pulpit. And remember, I come from a big Italian family; everybody's Catholic, And you don't do that. And there is no Billy Graham at 5, and I have no idea who he is anyway. And I've got my grandfather's hassock and a Bible on it, and I'm the pages are open. I can't read, and I'm going, what is the truth? What is the truth? So, that's at 5 years old. But I remember the first time I saw Frankenstein and the Wolfman, I was freaked out. And Dracula. Couldn't watch them. I mean, all three of those movies just impacted me. And I'm going, I couldn't articulate them. What kind of a planet am I on that people are making this stuff?
Well, let me just...
Like, what? What is this?
Let me interrupt you. Hold on 1 second. I don't like interrupting you, and I haven't done it, but I want to right now because that brings up a very interesting point. You said those movies kind of scared you. Something in you kind of said, wait a second, some of this might be too real. What do you take from the modern interpretation where we turn these creatures, these monsters, these evil entities into love interests? Things like Twilight, where the werewolf boy loves the girl, or the sparkly vampire falls in love with the girl. We're making evil good in that case, aren't we?
And that ties once again back into the biblical prophetic narrative, calling evil good and good evil. That's exactly where we are. Everything is completely upside down. The Twilight series now, vampires are cool. I want to be a vampire. Werewolf, yeah, no problem. I mean, it is absolutely unbelievable where we are, how far down the rabbit hole we are, and how, New Age philosophies that you can be God, that it's okay, and the idea of transhumanism, singularity, men becoming machines, living forever, the whole deal. I mean, it's like you will be like God. And that's the underlying paradigm, which everything is in operation. I mean, you will be like God. I mean, just think of Avatar, the guy who's the movie a few years ago, James Cameron, and people were, at the end of that movie, they have the shaman standing up there, and everybody's doing the woo-woo arm thing, right? And his spirit goes from his body into the roots of the tree, and it becomes an avatar. I mean, it's absolute nonsense. It's just total nonsense. But people are lapping this stuff up.
Yeah, they are.
It up, and the roots of it go back into the occult. The roots of it go back into shamanism. That's where it all goes. And it's like, look, the power of the enemy is real. And you can get that power if you want it. I mean, there was a ritual that was done at a church that I was the music director at. This is years and years and years ago, okay? Actually, probably not that far back, but around 2005, 2006, somewhere in that time frame. So it's over 10 years ago. It was at the Malibu Vineyard. And as music director, I would get up early, get there first, open up the church, turn on the heater, get the sound equipment ready, get everything set up for the musicians, and we would lead worship. And we had great bands and great worship teams. But I got there at the steps of the church, and there was like a portico which you'd walk through, and then there were the doors. And I'm looking at it going, what the heck is that? And I got close to it. There's a circle which is about 4 to 5 feet in diameter, and then a pentagram in that circle, and then candles burning, and then a slaughtered dove. Hello! I mean, that's a ritual that was done on the steps of that church. That was deliberate. That was basically someone threw down the gauntlet, basically. And 3 months later, actually less than that, that church underwent one of the most radical, debilitating splits I've ever seen. 3,000 people were gone. They lost the building, which at that time was worth about $12 million. It was a state-of-the-art building. 3,000 people. The pastor was dead 2 years later. The head elder died of a massive heart attack within 6 months on a trip to Hawaii, and on and on and on it goes. The power is real. And the problem is when I went into staff meeting on that Monday morning, I was poo-pooed. The pastor, that's not, we don't have to worry about that. The enemy is real. And unless the church stands up and understands that they are right now, there are covens throughout America. Talk to Russ Dizdar. There are covens in America. There are sleeper people in your church, and I'm not saying there's a demon under every rock, but there's people in your church that are warring against the pastor because they hate Christianity. Guaranteed it's happening.
Oh, yeah. I actually saw a woman, well, actually two women dressed in all white, burning books in a church parking lot, dancing around the books. I don't know what books, but I took a picture of it because it was nobody else was there, and they were in the far end of the parking lot. The church wasn't even open. And I'm like, what is going on? And then I had a Satanist on the show, and he said, oh, yeah, we purposely go in, we pretend we're great members, we join the youth group and the men's group, and we're really destroying churches. And if you look at the fact that 7,000 churches a year go under, 3 million people leave the faith, there is an attack.
That's exactly what's going on. I mean, that's exactly what's going on. There is a war. You see, I go to this one church in Malibu, and I won't say the name of it, and I love it, and it's really cool, and I love what the pastor teaches, and I support it. But it's and most of the people who go there are under 30. It's a very, very young-minded, oriented church. But the problem is, as I see it, that this pastor never ever talks about spiritual warfare. In fact, we were discussing last week a chapter out of Peter, and he cut off where it says, and don't forget, Satan runs around like a roaring lion, seeks to whom he may destroy. And he never got to that scripture. Instead, he talked about, the scriptures before that. And that's fine. He's being led by the Holy Spirit to do what he has to do to preach to his people. And I understand that, and that's fine and all well and good. And that's why I never say anything. I just put it up on my blog. I do what I do. I'm on shows like this. I have a national platform, so I don't have to get involved in a local deal. But all I can tell you is this, that much of the church never, ever discusses these things. And for those of us who are watchmen, hear the watchmen, get the live streaming, folks. For those of us who are watchmen and are waving our arms as frantically as we can, trying to wake up a sleeping church going, we need the whole counsel of God, not just one little particular part. God has a plan for your life and everything's hunky-dory and roses. People need to understand how to put on the armor of God, how to understand that the battle is in the mind, that the enemy will whisper, that he will tell us lie upon lie upon lie. He will build a web of lies around us so that we're comfortable in them. We believe the lies about who we are, who he says we are, or that you'll never amount to anything, or that you'll always be this, or that you can't do that. That's what the enemy does. He comes to rob, kill, and destroy. And most of the church never addresses who we're fighting. Look, the elements of the faith, the basic doctrine of the faith is salvation. I get that. And Paul says we need to move away from that. Once we get saved, now we need to understand the deeper things of Christ. And I mean that. And the deeper things are putting on the armor and coming up to the front line and doing our part as men and women to fight the battle. Because we're fighting powers that are not flesh and blood, that are not of this earth, that have an agenda. And that agenda is a satanic one, a Luciferian one. And they're ongoing. They haven't stopped in thousands of years.
L.A. Marzulli, lamarzulli.net, hearthewatchman.com. Get the live stream. L.A., stay where you're at just for a minute. Folks, you stay there too. We'll be back right after this. All right, second hour, Josh Tolley Show, GCN Radio Network. We have twisted his arm a little bit and convinced L.A. Marzulli to give us another segment. So forget all the typical second hour intro stuff. Let's just get right back to it. lamarzulli.net, hearthewatchman.com. Get the live stream. All right, L.A., one of the questions that I'm sure continues to come up, why should we even care about this stuff? I mean, we have politicians who aren't passing Obamacare bills, or repeal bills, rather. We got, the Brexit coming up. Why should we even be caring about these things that we can't even mention by name, and aliens and things that go bump in the night?
Because we know that at some point in time, things are going to escalate, where that the veil that separates what we would call the supernatural from the natural will be shattered, not thin, shattered. And I think we're in the window of time where we're actually seeing that. Look, Drudge Report stated about 3 weeks ago, and I'll be bringing this to bear. Also, Fox News has a video of it, which I'll bring it to bear at the Hear the Watchman conference next weekend. You want the live streaming, but they basically stated this, that UFO sightings are at an all-time high. Whoa! So what are we supposed to do with that? Forget about it, not talk about it? There are people in your church, guaranteed right now, if you were to stand up on a Sunday morning, I challenge the pastors to do this. Of course, they won't. Most of them won't. Some of them do. Thank God some of them stand up and actually address this stuff. There are between 5% and 35% of the men and women sitting in your pews right now who are born-again Spirit-filled Christians who have seen lights in the sky, UFOs, had encounters of the first, second, third, and fourth kind. Fourth kind meaning, face-to-face with so-called alien activity. We've got, in the new film, The Watchmen Chronicles, in their own words, UFOs are real. We have two whistleblowers that come on the record 30 years apart from their experiences, no collusion between them, talking about there's a military personnel that they saw military personnel working side by side with what we would call aliens, the Greys. And then there were these tall figures, well over 9 feet tall, that seemed to be directing the proceedings. I mean, what do you do with this? What do we do with this kind of information? Drudge Report, UFO sightings at an all-time high. 30% of the people sitting in your pew, upwards of 30% of the people sitting in your church right now have had encounters, and they're afraid to talk about them. Josh, look, this is all, it's all the coming great deception. And what people need to understand is that, look, first of all, I'm staunchly pre-trib. I want to get that out of the way. So people can, please don't write me and tell me where I'm going wrong. But I believe that we're out of here. I believe that with all my heart. That's my blessed hope, okay? On the other hand, how much of this lunacy and supernatural stuff are we actually going to see before we get taken up? And no one knows the answer to that. We're already seeing it. The fact that Drudge Report reports UFOs at an all-time high is, to me, alarming. All it takes is one craft sitting in the sky over a major city and not going away for 48 hours, 72 hours, something like that. That's the game changer, Josh, and I think we're headed to it. If the church is still here, it's almost, at that point, it's almost too late to start talking about it. We need to do this our priority. Before the event happens, we need to warn the people of what is coming, what I call the coming great deception. The UFO phenomenon has been going in this cat and mouse game for decades. And that means they're being restrained by something. Something is holding them back. Surely if they were from Zeta Reticuli, they would just go, hey, we're here. We created all life on this planet. We genetically manipulated you. We started the world's civilizations and earliest religions. And now, at this critical juncture, we're back to usher mankind into a golden age. That's where eventually that's what they're going to say when they finally do the reveal. But you know what? Most people are ambivalent. Most people don't care. And what people don't understand is this. If when they show up, that's the game changer. That's the game changer. And people, by the millions, will lose their faith in the Bible. There's a book right now called The Greatest Deception, which is sort of a play on my words, The Coming Great Deception. And this guy is trying to tell us that UFOs are all through the Bible, and that the pillar of cloud, the pillar of fire was actually a UFO, and that the miracles of Jesus were performed by UFOs. And it's not, okay, look, something's going on here. I get that. But he's trying to tell us that extraterrestrials basically created the biblical prophetic narrative. And we're saying, no, it's not. And this is what we're up against. Every Friday, the History Channel, every single Friday, for 7, 8 years now, tells us that ancient astronauts visited this planet and were responsible for creating a lot of the structures that we see, the megalithic sites that we see, that they interacted with us, that maybe we're hybrids. I mean, I don't know how it goes. The church, silent, not a word. And because of that silence, we do our parishioners a great injustice, in my opinion.
So do you think the great deception that you're talking about, do you think the deception is a government sort of Project Blue Beam, it's going to be a hologram, there's really not aliens? Or do you think the deception is there are aliens, they're demonic, and they're going to convince us that they're the saviors?
I think it's the latter. I think Blue Beam, as Paul McGuire comes on the record in my new film, The Watchmen Chronicles, McGuire says, look, Project Blue Beam, we know that it exists, but we have to be very, very sophisticated in order to pull the wool over millions and millions of people. I think the latter, that when these guys show up, and they will show up at some point, the question is the church still here? And if they show up and the church is still here, that's the game changer. Then we need to rethink our position as to, what's really going on here. Because if they show up, millions of people will lose their faith, guaranteed. When they show up, and I've heard this has been in ufology for decades, that people who are taken aboard the ship are shown these like holographic films, which are not films. It's not a projector. It's a holograph, and they're looking at this, everything played out, and in that, ET is responsible for the resurrection of Jesus, and that's what they claim to see. So why would these people make that up? Why come? In fact, in my very first book I ever wrote, Nephilim, published in 1999 by Zondervan, and now we publish it under Spiral of Life, my own publishing company, that why come millions of miles to tell us that Jesus really wasn't the Messiah and that Jesus wasn't God? Why not give us the cure to cancer? And, of course, they never do that. They never, ever do that. But they'll always go out of their way to tell us that somehow, Jesus really wasn't who he said he was, and that we'll tell you who God really is. So this is why I call it the coming great deception. And, look, if there's plenty of time for a rapture, for those of you who are alarmed by that, you could have the revealing of the UFO phenomena, a craft showing up or whatever, and then, a year later, 2 years later, I mean, there's no specific time. There's no specific sign for a pre-trib rapture to happen. It can happen at any moment, literally. And I just believe that is my blessed hope. Other people could disagree. Well, we're going to go through the tribulation. That's fine. You want to go through it, that's your business. I just don't believe that we're, been destined to wrath, as it were. So I'm hoping, my hope is the fact that when things really start to get crazy, we get taken out of here. And I don't want to belabor the point or spend too much time on it. In the meantime, as I said earlier, who would have imagined 40, 50 years ago that gay marriage would be the law of the land? Who would have imagined 100 years ago that there'd be abortion clinics all around the country, and that you could kill your baby up to what is it, like 7 months now? That's a viable human being. Are you kidding me? Who would have imagined anything like that? Who would have imagined that 1 billion children, 1 billion babies would be aborted from their mother's womb since Roe v. Wade? 1 billion. I mean, I can't even get my head around that, but that's the stat. Over 60 million in this country alone, 1 billion worldwide. Who would have imagined? I mean, you can't imagine these things. So that creates a blood curse on the planet, not only on the land, but on the planet.
We're under a blood curse. That's freaking, man. We could just keep talking to you. This is why you have to go to the website, folks, lamarzulli.net. Go to the store tab. Also, get the Hear the Watchman stream. Hear the Watchman. HearTheWatchman.com. Get the stream. All right, folks, we'll be back right after this. Thank you, LA, so much.
All right, Josh. Take care. See you next week.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you loved what I had to say, then subscribe right here. If you hated what I had to say, subscribe right here. It's fun being mad on social media, isn't it? Either way, I'd love to hear from you. Send me an email right there.